Hello everybody, here for a random rant today. This one's just kind of subject of how some businesses treat their employees, and that seems rather strange. There's, I don't know, a lot of people out there talking about different things. I know it's America, you have the right to work anywhere you want. Most states in our union here in the United States are right to work states, so they can fire you for absolutely no good reason. They don't have to give you any information about it, all that kind of stuff. But there's just a lot of situations where companies are so terrified to be politically correct and all the bullshit. It just drives me insane to think about the fact that how so many times I've seen it over and over again from, you know, retail shops like your big box stores and stuff, where you have a really hard-working employee and then you have an employee who constantly bitches and moans and whines about having to work weekends or having to work odd hours and all that kind of random shit. And it seems like whoever bitches and complains the most, the supervisors don't want to listen to them. They don't want to hear them bitch. So they go ahead and just give in to the troublemakers, give in to the people who are stirring the shit all the time. And the people who are actually showing up to work every day, working hard, doing their job, not constantly complaining, not showing up late, not taking long breaks, all kind of crap. They're the ones, because they don't want to stir shit. They don't want to, I guess, I don't know, they don't want to cause trouble. They're the ones that always give in when it comes time to work the overtime, when it comes time to work the weekends, work the holidays, all that kind of crap. They're constantly always willing to do it. So seems like the people who complain and whine the most get the better positions because supervisors don't have the balls. And unfortunately, a lot of the unlawful terminations and all that kind of crap and discrimination lawsuits out there have situations where they're constantly just, I don't know, forever and always terrified of saying the wrong thing to the wrong person. And one of the guys that I've read a couple of his books, actually I should listen to his books on audio, I don't do much reading, is Larry Wingett. And one of the comments he made, which I found extremely entertaining years ago, he made the comment of, fire your shitty employees. If you've got a crappy employee that doesn't get along with anybody, causes problems all the time stuff, if they're not a good worker, and his answer to it was, I would gladly spend good money on great attorneys. Good money on great attorneys as opposed to good money on shitty employees. So it's one of those situations where they'll move people around to odd shifts, they'll move people around to odd jobs, and they kind of go with the whole seniority, which don't get me wrong. If somebody's worked for your company for 25 years and another person only worked there for 2 years, definitely the person who's worked there for 25 years should get rights if the other two things are equal. So if you have two employees, both of them do their job, both of them work just as hard, both of them are just as qualified, all that good stuff, it makes no sense why you wouldn't obviously want to give it to the one with the more seniority. But if you have somebody who's been there for 25 years and is taking their job for granted, takes long breaks, doesn't put out the kind of, production numbers that somebody's only been there for 2 years does, it makes no sense to me at all why you would leave the person's been there for 25 years on a shift or give them the better hours or that kind of junk. Where if you got somebody that's only been there for a couple years but busts their ass and is constantly to work early, they're ready to go when their time gets there, they're always going above and beyond their job, they're willing to help out other people, they're willing to take on other positions, whether it be go do other jobs that nobody else wants, whether they're willing to do work that nobody else wants to do. And if you look at their constant numbers, they're always selling more, they're always producing more. If it's a factory situation where their numbers are always higher, they're producing more product, they're producing less scrap, I guess, less faulty items that come back for rework, less problems, they don't have the complaints against them. And it makes your company overall more money because obviously they're going in. If they produce a product that's good the first time going out, it's a lot cheaper to produce the product good the first time than it is to bring the product back have to rework it, have a customer that receives your product that's no longer happy with it, and that can only happen so many times before you end up in a situation where, you know, you're going to lose a customer. I mean, you can only have somebody screw up so often and so long before they no longer want to deal business with you. So in a country, unfortunately, it's getting full of employees that don't give a shit, I guess, about the final product, don't care about the overall good of the company, and they have a hard time seeing the fact that if the company does well, that means the company makes money, means the company may be able to give you more money per hour, which that's not really the big thing, but the company has enough money to actually stay in business. That's the big deal. So there's way too many people out there who are concerned about, well, I'll do more work when they pay me more money. And it needs to come down more to the fact of, if you do better work, you do more work, and show them you're worth your money, then fine. I've had some people I know that worked in, we're talking very small companies where there's the owner and one single employee and then maybe a bookkeeper, that the single employee is throwing a fit because he can make more money working elsewhere. But you agreed to go to work, you agreed to work 40 hours a week for, whether it be $1 an hour or $1,000 an hour, don't matter what it is. If you agreed upon that and you can't prove to your employer what your worth is, you're worth more money, don't go to work and only work half speed because you think you're worth more money. It drives me absolutely nutty when people go in there and think, well, I'm only getting paid $10 an hour and I should be getting paid 15, so I'm only going to work, so I'm only making 2/3 the money I think I'm worth per hour, I'm only going to work 2/3 as hard. So I've seen numerous situations where people have just blatantly, openly sent out a product that was no good, and I'm like, hey man, what the hell? He goes, oh, I don't give a shit. You know, it's not my deal. Well, it is your deal when that person who received that product is now unhappy with it, which means they won't bring another product back. Whether it be a mechanic shop, whether it be a body shop, whether it be, I mean, a retail shop, whether it be any of that stuff, if you don't give the best service possible, there's only a finite amount of people in this world that'll actually buy from you. There was a quote made by a very large car dealership out in Colorado, hell, probably back in the 70s. I was talking to an ex-employee who then owned his own dealership. At the time, you know, he was just a salesman for the company, and the dealership really kept horrible practices. I mean, they treated people poorly. They would always try and backdoor screw them over stuff for overcharges that wasn't right. And his answer was, this is back in the 70s, and it's out near, I think it was near Denver, just a suburb of Denver. And he said there was, I don't know at the time, a couple 100,000 people that were in his general vicinity he would consider a drawing pool of customers. And his answer was, I don't need repeat customers because I have 200,000 people to sell a car to. All I have to do is sell each one a car once. And if I make an extra $500 off that person and they're not happy, what do I give a shit? I got 199,999 more customers to sell to. Unfortunately, when a customer is happy with your product and they think you've done a great job, they may tell 1 or 2 people. When a customer is extremely unhappy with your product and they find out you completely screwed them over, they're going to tell at least 100 people. So if you screw over, 1,000 people, you really just lost yourself 100,000, future customers. So it's one of those situations where people seem to only look out for themselves, and it just, I don't know, there's so much crap out there. There's so many things where people get, tossed around different shifts. Companies will say, they'll make a corporate policy of, we will not move you to another shift. We won't do this. We won't do that. And then turn around and literally just straight up, flat out lie. Lack of a better term. And they straight up lie, and they'll do it. You see it all the time in companies. You hear about it all the time. And it's one of those situations where the people who it's not affecting, they don't stand up, but they don't realize eventually it will affect them. There was an old proverb or short story, or however the heck it was, about a mouse that was in the house at the farm, how to see a mouse trap set behind the stove with a piece of cheese on it. He went out to the barn lot to the animals and stuff, real small little farm, and talked to the animals and said, hey man, I really need one of you guys to help me. I don't know if I can resist the urge to go back there and eat that cheese, and I'm really concerned I'm gonna die if I go and eat that cheese, but I just can't resist the urge to eat that cheese. And the chicken looked at me and said, not my problem, man. Your mousetrap doesn't affect me at all. So he went to the pig, told the pig the same story. The pig's like, man, he goes, I got a sloth full of, of slop here to eat. He goes, I can't help you, man. It doesn't affect me. I don't care. Went to the cow. The cow said the same thing, man. That's your problem. You're just a mouse. Nobody cares about you. Good luck with it all. And that night, went back in the house. About 2 o'clock in the morning, the wife, or the woman of the house, heard the mouse trap snap, and she went up behind the stove to go ahead and get rid of the mouse before it started to stink up the house. And unfortunately, she reached behind the stove to grab the mouse trap and the dead mouse, and it wasn't a mouse in it. It was actually a rattlesnake that then bit her, and she was infected. And in the process of trying to keep her from dying, they called the doctor out. The doctor said maybe some chicken soup would help. So the farmer ran out, butchered the chicken real quick to make the chicken soup. They tried to give it to her. 2 days later, the woman passed away from the snake bite. And of course, they couldn't afford the funeral and that. They couldn't afford to have her buried, so the farmer went and had the cow sold to slaughter to be butchered, so he'd have the meat and that, so he could sell the cow for meat to pay for the funeral and pay for the doctor bills. The entire family showed up from out of state for the funeral, and the farmer, again, not having any extra money, couldn't afford to go buy food, so he butchered the pig to feed the family who all came to mourn the loss of his wife. And the whole story of it is the mouse sat behind the stove eating the piece of cheese that was left in the trap after the snake got out of it because the woman was bit. And the mouse looked back out on the farm, to the barn lots, and the chicken's dead, the pig's dead, and the cow's butchered also. And said, I guess that little mouse trap did affect all of us. So some of the times people got to look at maybe if everybody stood up and just agreed to do what's right and kind of help fight for somebody that you may not think it affects you at the moment, it may in the long run end up affecting you. So I don't know, it seems like it adds tension to a company when even as little as 1 or 2 people in a 500 or 1,000 person factory get screwed over. It brings up a lot of talk and a lot of hatred, and just puts a little ounce of disconcern and distrust in your company. And if you have even 10% of the people, so you got, say you got 1,000 people in the factory and 10% of them get affected, it's 100 people that now have a bad taste and less respect for your company. So I don't know, it just seems like there's so many times, I understand it's all about the better good of the company, but sometimes you can find somebody else who's willing to go take a different position. There is a factory action years ago, I remember they were talking about doing layoffs, and there was a bunch of people who have been in the factory for 10, 15, 25, 35 years, 45 years, worked there since they were just out of high school, and they were talking about doing layoffs, and there was a handful of new people who obviously, young family, couldn't afford it, hadn't been working there a year or two, and didn't have the savings, didn't have the money, and their answer was, we don't do voluntary layoffs. It's just whoever's low man on the totem pole gets laid off, and a lot of those guys couldn't afford to live on unemployment, and they got bumped out, and they had to go find their jobs elsewhere, and they were probably good employees. Hell, might have been great employees, but it's one of those things, because their corporate policy said lay off the lowest guy with the least seniority. It's all we care about. And then there's another factory, the exact same factory, actually years later, got bought out by their company, and they actually allowed for voluntary layoff. So they actually changed the policy and allowed some of the older people who have been there forever. One gentleman I know had been working there since like 70, I want to say 76, something like that, maybe 74. He's been working there, still works there. And a couple of years ago, he actually took, I believe it was like 10 months off voluntary layoff. So he could afford to do it. He had enough savings. He didn't have big house payments. He'd already been working all those years. He was making more money. And actually, he had loans through the credit union through that company. Was actually because the fact they forfeit all payments on those loans, that were kind of interesting, that when you're on layoff, you don't have to make the payment. You just have to pay the interest, I believe, or the interest just accrues. I'm not sure which way it was. And actually laughed and joked to the fact that his paycheck was actually larger on unemployment than it was when he worked, because of the fact of the payments being suspended for the loans he had out. And his wife also had a full-time job, so they were making find money, didn't need it. One of those great things that worked out wonderfully. So that kept another employee working all the time there who actually probably couldn't afford to live on his unemployment because he wasn't making as much money and was able to stay working, making his full-time checks. So it's one of those situations where I understand the bigger your company gets, the less likely you're going to have the ruling of, I'm going to make a decision for what's right for the particular people. And when you've got some of the companies out there that they're a subsidiary of large companies, large corporations take them over, they don't think that the people who are able to make decisions are smart enough to actually make the decisions properly and correctly. So they write corporate policies that just sound good at the beginning but trickle down at the end. Doesn't make sense. So it's one of those things where if everybody would stop looking at the whole, I don't know, if everybody could look at individual situations and not have to have a single one answer that answers across, because you figure there's something other that have 25 or 30,000 people employed, and what works for someone in Idaho might not work for somebody here in Iowa. What works for the company in New York State might not work for the company in California. So every single plant, I think, needs to be able to have an override policy for the process, but I don't know. It just drives me nuts. There's a situation right here locally. It's just people are getting moved to opposite shifts they don't want to get moved to and all that. And it just, I don't know. It all seems to drive me just ape shit batty when people aren't able to look at things correctly and just make single decisions. So pretty much that's what we got at the moment. And I don't know. If any of you out there watching this have the right to make decisions, and if you're a smaller company, you got anywhere from 1 to, I don't know, dozen employees, it makes sense to me the fact to, if you do have to do a layoff or you have to, cut back with a recession or it's slow time of year, ask your employees, is anybody willing to volunteer to take a layoff period? And I understand if you have one, let's say you have a construction crew and you have 5 guys working there, and let's say one of them is your master guy. He knows every single thing inside and out. He's kind of the supervisor who gives direction to the other 4 guys. Clearly, if that guy wants to take the voluntary layoff, that's going to be hard because obviously the other 4 guys might be less qualified, might not be able to do the jobs he's able to do. You have to go to that guy and go, hey man, I'm sorry, I can't let you, do that. Or give him partial layoff maybe. Let him have off 3 days a week so when he comes in 2 days a week. Or let him have 2 days a week off when he has to work 3 days a week. There's a lot of people out there willing to agree to all, rotate. If you got 5 guys, maybe every guy is willing to take 1 day a week off. That way they can all stay working. They're all going to get a little bit smaller paycheck, but it keeps everybody working. So, and maybe it's a thing where they figure out that each guy is going to take 1 week a month off or something, whatever you can work out. But don't just say, hey, guess what? I made a decision, Joe, you're fired, or Joe, you're on layoff, or whatever the heck it is. You'd be amazed if everybody's allowed to work together, everybody sees it as an opportunity to help each other, they're all going to be willing to do that. I mean, there was a deal with the county crew, for the road crew, construction and that, where a gentleman was injured very severely, had health problems and stuff, was going to miss a ton of work, and they're able to bank up what they call their, I guess they get so many hours every month. I think they get like, I don't know, if it's an hour a week or an hour a month, where it is, of basically sick or personal time, where you want to call it, and they can bank up months and months. There's a couple guys I know that have over a year of the time built up, fully paid, all that kind of stuff, and they all got together and they actually gave this guy part of their time off. It was non-reimbursed, nothing. The guy was literally going to lose everything because of the fact he hadn't worked there long enough to be drawing full disability. He wasn't injured that bad, but he was going to miss a lot of work. Every single man gave up some hours. One guy, I believe, gave up 6 months of his personal time that he had banked up. This is this guy's money. This guy makes good money, but he gave up a half a year's salary to another employee because the guy was a good guy, he was a good employee, and it was nothing he does within his power. So it's amazing if you allow people to work together, allow things like that to happen. It's, I don't know, it's one of those situations where you'd be surprised what everybody can work together and find an answer. But just to walk up and tell, this one person or those 3 people, guess what? You got to go to their shift, or you got to move to their plant, or you got to whatever the hell it be. you'd be amazed. There might be somebody else willing to just volunteer to take that position. Whether it be the fact they don't have any family, maybe their spouse works an odd shift, maybe their spouse works out of town all week, they're a traveling salesman, or who knows what it is. They'd be fine taking a second or third shift to keep the one that has small children or watches the grandchildren while their daughter's at work, or whatever the heck the number be, would be willing to take their place. So it just seems strange for a company not to give that option. But anyway, enough of that crap. Just me blowing off some steam here, I guess. So anyway, thanks for letting me bitch. So have yourself a wonderful and safe day. Thanks for watching.